Horror in video games is often displayed with many violent, graphic, and disturbing images meant to shock the player, whether it's the use of over-the-top jump scares built for internet reactions, or gruesome imagery that will make you turn your head away in disgust. Games like Outlast and Five Nights at Freddy's come to mind as some of the more popular modern horror games with these traits. And as a result of games like this, we saw a surge of indie horror games trying to replicate this feeling. These games usually set the player in an old house, an abandoned hospital, a facility, or an empty field, with some sort of creature or demon chasing after them, ready to pop out into their face at any given moment. And that's all well and good. There's no shame in enjoying this sort of thing, or making it. I myself have watched and played my fair share of these games, even making some videos on Outlast 4 years ago. But it can get really old, really fast. Jump scares tend to feel cheap and unearned, and as more and more of these games got made, a lot of them started to feel like they were made for one sole purpose: to get some YouTuber to jump. Oftentimes, these games were technical nightmares with horrid concepts that did little more than have the player walk down a barely visible hallway until an obnoxiously loud sound played and something jumped out of their face.
Anti-gravity stuff.
But what if we took away the jump scares? And what if we took away the enemies? These are the horror games of indie developer David Szymanski. They are short, story-driven, and there is not a jump scare in sight. Yet, they are some of the most affecting horror games I have ever played. Now, David has made quite a few games that are all really good in their own right, including an awesome throwback FPS, but for this discussion, I'm going to be talking about 3 of his horror games. Now, this video isn't to say these games are perfect, as they certainly have a few issues, but the way he frames his games and the ideas behind the horror are truly special in a field of horror games that can feel so similar. To best describe what makes his horror special, I'll let David speak for himself. In a 2016 interview with HorrorBuzz.com, David described his approach as him preferring a slow-building dread to outright terror. For me, games that try for the outright terror approach end up either being really ineffective or simply unpleasant. He goes on to say that he wanted to emulate the minimalism of the point-and-click adventure Scratches, creating horror with as little as possible rather than bombarding the player with tons of hit-or-miss scares. I'm kind of a minimalist at heart, and I see an inherent aesthetic appeal in doing a lot with a little. So for me, it's preferable to scare the player with a whisper or a word, rather than a screeching monstrosity. This attitude towards horror can be seen directly in his very first release, a free, 20-minute game titled Finger Bones. Finger Bones takes place in a small bunker with a few different rooms. The story is told through both the environment and scattered notes from the owner of the bunker, a character named the Father. See, in Finger Bones, the horror comes from the ambience in part, but it's mostly the sick and twisted psyche of the Father character. Throughout the game, the notes you read are filled with some disconcerting messages that never directly state his intentions, but the subtext is pretty clear. The actions of a natural creature are natural and thus moral, unless a concrete scientific reason can be given to prove them as immoral. Katie and I only survived because we ran to the bunker. Perhaps this is what I've needed. Freedom from all the irrational rules and inane social values. Just pure, beautiful survival. There are things I've wanted to do for years. Desires I've kept locked in the back of my consciousness. It's been nearly a year since I've seen a woman, and now I realize there's no practical reason to keep those desires locked up anymore. As you read more and travel deeper into the bunker, it's evident that his sanity is beginning to slip, and his morality is completely absent. By the time you get to the cellar, you're not really afraid of getting stabbed or killed, no. Subconsciously, you're afraid of what you might find. David's next game was a bit longer, this time spanning around 40 minutes and set in both indoor and outdoor environments. It's titled The Moon Sliver, and it follows the lives of a group of 4 people, stranded on a deserted, dying, and almost biblical island, where their only goal is to protect the Moon Sliver, this artifact that keeps them safe from the evil of the world. Eventually, they start to have mixed feelings of their purpose in life, as being stranded on this island almost feels worse than the hell they are so desperately trying to hide from. This game is a bit more poetic than Finger Bones, with the dialogue never telling the player more than the vague outline of a time that once was. There are no sinister implications of fathers killing daughters. Instead, it's more about the horrible reality that these lost souls had to face every day, until their untimely demise. The following passage, taken from a discarded poem in the game, really captures the essence of their struggle. O world, O prison dingy white, O ghostly shadow gray, your whelming lies of false delight are dark and cold as moonless night, and bleak as sunless day. Their sense of isolation, desperation, and abandonment are the core components of the Moon Sliver, and while there are certainly some really creepy moments as you travel through the maze near the end of the game, the Moon Sliver is less about scaring you, and more about giving you a haunting depiction of a desolate world and the people left behind to inhabit it. The Music Machine is the third and final game I'm going to be talking about today, and it's easily my favorite out of all of David's work. And the concept alone, I think, is just brilliant. The game centers around Haley, a peppy 13-year-old girl, and Quentin, a ghost who's puppeting her body with the intent of finding a satisfactory way to kill her. As the game progresses, you go through many different conversations between the two, learning about their previous friendship and the horrible circumstances that led to Quentin's untimely death, and why he now feels he must get revenge. The game is set in a striking monochromatic style that beautifully captures the surreal nature of the tale. The Music Machine takes its time to build up tension through character interactions and the eerie stillness of the world. The game is actually just as sad as it is creepy, as the characters can never truly get over the incredible weight that their past actions hold. This weight is carried over to the player as well, and as you approach the end, and find Quentin's preferred killing method, it can become a little unbearable waiting to see how everything will turn out for the characters. I don't want to spoil it here, but just know that the end of the game is one of the most beautiful and satisfying endings I have ever witnessed, and it takes full advantage of the unique art style. The Music Machine may be the least frightening out of these three, but it is certainly the most impactful. So yeah, that's a brief description of David's work. What I think really sets it apart is his attention to creating an atmosphere beyond something that is just simply creepy. In Fingerbones, it was the sinister implications of a man gone crazy. In the Moon Sliver, it was creating this haunting, desolate world. And in the Music Machine, it's the dark and sad emotional connection between Haley and the ghost Quentin, who's controlling her through the entire experience. These games are about the characters as much as anything else, and the worlds act as their own characters with their own distinct features and feelings and stories to tell. And that's what I think really sets him apart from everyone else.